Mike Owens here, and today I'm joined by one of the finest minds in MMA coaching, Eric Nicksick, the head coach of Extreme Couture down in Las Vegas. Eric, always a pleasure to get your time. How are things at you today?
What's up, Mike? Yeah, doing well, man. Just got back home from Long Beach, so back in the grind.
I did want to talk about the Jeremy Kennedy fight,
Sure.
it's kind of it's kind of we could go a lot of different ways, couldn't we? You know, we could talk about the finish, but I kind of wanted to focus in on the video that you put out on your Instagram, kind of calling out Scott Coker, saying that Aaron Pico was on his way to winning that fight. Um, how much do you think the sport suffers from stuff like that, where maybe promotions or fans or media presume that a fighter's winning because they were supposed to win?
Man, I just think it was a huge discredit to Jeremy, our camp, to everybody involved. To be honest with you, like, look, I get it that Aaron suffered an injury. It was unfortunate. None of us wanted that to happen, but to say his exact words was, "We all saw Aaron was well on his way to victory," was completely false. There was nothing shown at all. It was a 10-9 round for Jeremy. I get the injury was unfortunate, and that's that. But to go on record saying well on his way to victory, I thought was a complete slap in the face and a disservice to Jeremy and the camp and the round that he put together. I know it was one and the fight was short lived, but I'm always going to have my guys back. And if a guy screws up, I'll step up and say our guy was wrong there, but our guy did his job, and it was unfortunate that the promoter said that. I thought that sucked.
Look, it's a terrible situation for everyone. For Aaron Pico, with I dislocated my shoulder a few months ago. It's not a nice injury to have. It's terrible for Jeremy, but for from the coach's perspective, what's that kind of situation like for you, where you guys get the dub, but it's got to feel hollow in some way?
Yeah, it's the fight game. I think that we've all experienced and been on both sides of that when you do this sport for so long. I'm a huge fan of Brandon Gibson and Greg Jackson and Aaron Pico. All the while, it's a business, and I understand that. So, of course, we wanted to get the win the right way, the way we wanted to. But this is the fight game, and there's technicalities that happen. There's injuries that happen. That injury was occurred in the fight by our fighter.
Yeah.
Right. And it's something that happens, and it's unfortunate, but if it's something that we have to run back later on, then it's something we'll have to do. But at the end of the day, man, it's the fight game, and we're used to these kind of things.
Of course. Well, let's move from the past a little bit into the future, because one of the reasons I wanted to get you on today was to touch about Aljamain Sterling's upcoming title fight against TJ Dillashaw. So first and foremost, just for a little bit of context, how much have you worked with Aljamain throughout this camp? What has kind of the situation been?
So Aljo just went home last week, actually. So we worked this entire camp. So he went back home. He's going to finish up camp in Long Island, and he leaves on the 8th. So he heads out to Abu Dhabi on the 8th. So I essentially do everything for him out in Vegas. We run the entire camp for him, pads, sparring. He does all of his strength and conditioning over at the PI. He has his training partners over here at Extreme Couture. And then we kind of just pick and choose the partners that we want and need. And then he finishes up camp with Longo, those guys back in Long Island. And I know Ray will go out there with him, I think, fight week. And then he's taking Marab, Ally, Quinta, and then Dennis Bazooka will go out there with him for the fight. So I'm not cornering him. I'll be home for that one. But essentially now, so I got three different sparring sessions of his that will sit down, and he'll send me out all the sparring tape, and I'll kind of break everything down from here. So, but it's good. It works for him. It's what he wants, and I'm perfectly fine staying home.
I can well imagine. I can well imagine. I believe I have a belief that every fighter who gets to the world title level, becomes world champion, has kind of one special attribute. So I guess what I'd like to know from your perspective, Eric, is what is kind of Aljamain Sterling's USP? What is his kind of unique thing that makes him the man who's able to hold the world title?
Well, I think the physical attribute that you would see that jumps off the page is obviously his grappling, and his ability to get to the back and do things there. But to me, it's taking a step out of the athletic side of things is his fight IQ and his situational awareness. When we sit down and break down tape together, it's one of my favorite times because we really get to go and go fight IQ and feed off of things. But now you have a guy who essentially is like this Ferrari. He can do all these things. He can strike, he can wrestle, he can grapple, and being able to find the best way to win a fight, right? And then expose your opponent, but maybe nullify maybe some of the things that or shore up some of the holes you might have as the champion, which are very, very few. But after the Piotr Jan fight, the first one, man, like him and I had pages and pages and notes and stuff that we were able to go and break down for fight number 2. And then going out to being able to see him execute those things live and show the world that he is that world caliber fighter that, he was being discredited for. But we were able to take those mistakes in the first fight, apply them to the second fight, and he was able to go out and get his victory. So I definitely say it's fight IQ.
I think Aljamain Sterling's career is the perfect example of the hollowness of MMA fandom. And what I mean by that was he was a fan favorite prior to the first Yan fight. He was hated by a large part of or not hated, but he was disliked by a large part of the fan base, and now he's adored again. So as your guy, how does it feel to now that Aljamain is now back in that positive light by the fans and is back in their favor, if you like?
Yeah, that's great that you brought that up, Mike, because Aljo and I are laughing about that recently. Like we took a couple pictures and so I told Aljo, I was like, there's a lot less clown faces on our fucking comment feed and people talking shit. It's kind of nice. It's I feel like, TJ is now the heel in this fight and we're on the A side of the being the champion and doing it the right way, that people felt like he won that fight. So you can't take that away from him now. So it's been nice being on the A side of all the fucking hate that we were getting. But I'll tell you what, man, like he appreciates the fact that like, his Long Island family and then his Extreme Couture family never wavered, right? Like we understood what happened in the first fight. It wasn't his fault, but we're going to keep our mouth shut and work hard and go out and rectify that situation and go out and beat Jan. And we did that. So we're all for it.
100%. When we look at the man standing across from him, TJ Dillashaw, I think it's fair to say a veteran in the game. I think he's just turned 36 this year. Obviously former champion and kind of on this return tour after the PED suspension. When you look at TJ as an upcoming style matchup, what aspects of his game are you kind of concerned about, or are you game planning to nullify?
It's not necessarily the concern, more as just the fact of a respect of his game. Like, I don't think there's too many people that really revolutionized stance switch striking. Is very cerebral out of both stances, but has an offensive game. Dominic Cruz comes to mind, but I think Dominic can be repetitive in some of his stuff, whereas TJ has a lot of different routes, if you will. Yeah. And I'm obviously a Dwayne Ludwig guy. My lineage is through Dwayne, so he's my coach. And so it's nice kind of getting matched up against the guy who I consider one of the best coaching minds in the game. But it's also nice not having to stand across from him in the fight as well. So all in all, I think TJ brings a full MMA skill set from the feet to the floor, where he's very dynamic in all areas. So I think it's a great matchup, to be quite honest with you.
Of course. I do want to something you brought up there, the kind of comparison in footwork between Cruz and Dillashaw. Now, I know what you're kind of saying about how Cruz's footwork can be repetitive, but in some ways, I think Dillashaw's footwork can be repetitive. So what is the kind of key differentiator between those two styles of footwork, in your opinion?
Well, I think when you change stances a lot, your defense suffers. I think guys like to switch stances because of what offense it brings out for them. But you get into a focus of purely offense, where for me as a coach, if you're switching stances but your defense suffers, then you shouldn't be switching stances, because you're going to get your ass knocked out. Where I feel like, to me, TJ really does well in his stance switch because his defensive soundness remains the same out of both orthodox and southpaw.
Yeah, 100%. This is a difficult question to ask a coach, so I completely respect the answer that you get back. But there's been a lot of controversy around TJ Dillashaw, particularly the suspension. Where do you stand on drug offences in combat sports? Are you someone who thinks once you've served your time, you know, it's a clean slate? Or are you someone who maybe holds that grudge that once a cheater, always a cheater mindset?
That's a great question, Mike. And honest to God, man, this is my true answer is I don't care at that point, because for me, it's the guy that's in front of us, and I have to game plan against him,
Okay.
the athlete. I know it sounds kind of weird to say, like, so I have my coaching side of things and I have my personal side of things, right? My coaching side of things will eliminate a lot of the personal side. I don't want to bring personal issues into a fight. I want to bring analytics and this is what I feel will win us the fight, no matter who and what this person represents. So I think that eliminating the emotional side of things makes it kind of like more robotic, if you will. But that's, to me, is where I stand on a lot of those things where, you know, yeah, he served his time, but I think you're always going to associate with him for being a dirty fighter because of how long he might have been getting away with that stuff, right? That's the personal side of things. The coaching side of things sees a very dynamic, athletic TJ Dillashaw who's dangerous in all areas of the game. And, you know, we have to game plan for that fighter, whether it's, you know, whether you feel this way about him or not, it doesn't matter. He's going to be standing in front of my guy October 22nd, and that's what I have to deal with.
Yeah, 100%. And I do appreciate your answer there, because I realize that's a difficult question to ask.
For sure. And that's the honest to God truth, man. It's like, you know, man, I've been around this sport for 15 years now. You got to think there was a lot of dudes doing a lot of shit early on in this
I can
career,
well imagine. So. One thing that's so interesting about the bantamweight division in the UFC is, okay, Aljamain Sterling's the champ, TJ Dillashaw is the challenger at this present moment, but there's nothing conclusive to say that TJ is the second best bantamweight in the world. A lot of people could go a lot of different ways on that answer. So I guess if we're looking at your guy Aljo, who do you think would be the toughest fight for him in the bantamweight division?
I still think it's Piotr Jan. You know, I think it's 1A, and I think Piotr Jan is 1B in this division right now. I really do. I think Merab is right there too. He's climbing those rankings. I think Chito Vera's last outing was great. I think with you know, I think Rob Font has had a little bit of a lull, but I think Rob Font's skills and talent and his pedigree and his coaching staff is going to get him right back up there. Also, I think Sugar Sean O'Malley is sitting right there and can kind of tip the apple cart, if you will, and make this whole upset happen in Abu Dhabi. He's right there as well. So you can kind of go on in this division, man, and it really is. And then, you know, you got yourself Corey Sandhagen, who looked great in his last fight also. So you know, there's a lot of guys that are putting their name in the hat. I definitely feel like Piotr Jan, just knowing that the nightmares that dude gave us forever. You know, and I worked with Piotr Jan when he came out to Vegas. This was about 3 or 4 years ago. So I really, really enjoyed being able to hold pads for him years back. And I learned a lot from him in that time. And you got to remember, we don't speak the same language. We speak the language of MMA. So holding pads for him was a lot of fun for me, and learning movements and patterns that he did. So I have the utmost respect for Jan. I really do, man. I think he's a magnificent fighter, and I think he's right there.
Yeah, 100%. We'll turn the conversation a little bit away from Aljo briefly, and we'll talk a little bit about, I couldn't talk to the coach of the heavyweight champion without mentioning the heavyweight champion, because I know, Eric. Let's talk a little bit about Francis. So on a personal level, I think he's been out of the spotlight for a little bit. How is he personally, and how is the injury and the recovery going?
Yeah, he's doing great, man. We went to dinner on Sunday night. He's back home. He's clear to hit pads. So myself and Coach Dewey will get him in some work on some pad stuff. But you know, I feel like it feels like it's been so long. It's only been 6 months since he had surgery, major ACL surgery, MCL repair, and basically full knee recovery. So 6 months isn't really that long of a time, because I know people will hit us up and ask, like, hey, do you think he'll be ready for December? And I'm like, December? Like, that's literally puts him at 9 months post-op of an ACL surgery. So we're taking our time, man, and he's in good spirits. He's been doing great. It's gonna be nice having him back in the room, because I just love having his you know, just his demeanor, you know, and his aura, like the way he carries himself, and you know, the jokes and the shit talk and everything else that he brings. So having him back home and being around the family and being around the guys in the gym is always important, man, because we just love having him.
This is once again a difficult question I'm going to ask, but my belief is whenever you have one of those ACL, MCL, LCL type injuries, I believe it takes something away from an athlete. Do you agree with that sentiment? And if so, how much as a coach, as a head coach of Francis, do you anticipate that will affect his game plan and his actual ability moving forward?
I think that would have been true, 10, 15 years ago from football. I remember a lot of guys having those types of injuries and not coming back the same. And, a lot with their head and especially running backs, like they couldn't cut the same way that they did before and everything else. But the way that the medicine has advanced and the therapy has advanced over the years, I see a lot of these men and women coming back stronger and even better. You got to remember too, Mike, a lot of those injuries might have been, a partial ACL tear prior to, and then the whole ACL goes. So a lot of them have had knee damage, and then the whole knee ends up becoming fully damaged after. So I anticipate Francis, with the help of the PI and his therapy and recovery, coming back 100%, because I know that was been an issue with his knee in the past. We've dealt with little knee injuries and nagging things. So I see him coming back even better.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. And I do thank you for the knowledge on that. There's been a lot of speculation, and I don't expect you to give me an answer about what Francis's next fight is, because it could go a lot of different ways, and I don't want to get into contract disputes or anything like that. But from a coach, what is the optimal challenge for you? I.e., as what next opponent would you like to get your teeth stuck into when preparing Francis Ngannou for his next bout?
Well, I think you look at the three-headed monster, if you will, right? Obviously, Jon Jones's name is going to be up there. Cyril Gane's always going to be right there, and then you have to still give Stipe Miocic that opportunity as well. So, I think for me, being a competitor that I am, and we fought Stipe, we fought Gane. The fight that makes the most sense, and the fight that I really would love the opportunity to compete against, is Jon Jones. So, I would love that opportunity, man. I think Jon is the best, if not the best, to ever do it. He's moving up a weight class and he's coming to challenge himself. And then who better to be the guy to challenge him than the heavyweight champion of the world? So, yeah, hopefully that's the fight that we're able to make. And ideally maybe February, March, somewhere around that timeline.
Perfect. I want to talk very quickly about one of your other guys, Eric, and that's Dan Ige.
Yeah.
Now, Dan Ige is your boy. I know he's your boy, and I consider Dan Ige a friend as well. I know he's coming off the loss to Evloev. So how are things with Dan, and how are things with his situation?
Dan's been great. We actually got to hold pads from yesterday. He was working through a little bit of a tight backs and stuff. But so Tyson Chartier and his camp, Calvin Kattar, everybody was out here 2 weeks ago. So Tyson hit me up and said, "Hey, if I come out here for camp for 2 weeks, can we use Dan? Can we use Boston? Can we use Natan? We need some southpaw looks." And I said, "Yeah, of course." Tyson and I are very, very close friends. Although we've competed against each other, I consider him a great friend and a colleague. And I love Calvin, man. We had a fight against each other. It's business, but at the end of the day, he's a great dude as well. So it was all hands on deck. So Dan Ige did basically 2 weeks with Calvin Kattar and Tyson, all the boys over at the New England Cartel over at the PI. And he loved it, man. He said it was a great experience. He loved being able to compete against those guys again, and gained a lot of knowledge and came back with some good information on what those guys are doing and things that we could possibly add into our camp. So Dan's been refreshed, reinvigorated. We're hoping maybe he gets a fight maybe late December, sometime in January, we're hoping. So
I actually spoke to Calvin the day after his first day of training with Dan. That was my first question that I began the interview with, and he said that when they were maxed up, he was a little bit of disappointment, because although he'd never met Dan, he got the impression that he would like him. And then after it, they've been able to establish a relationship. Is that how? We go so many different ways on this question because it's so interesting. But I guess how I don't know how to ask you this question essentially, Eric. But how does that make you feel when you see your guy against an opponent that has beaten him, now getting that working together?
Well, I don't really think a whole lot of it other than the growth and the maturation of this sport. I think that for the longest time, there's this stereotypes of like, you have to hate your opponent. And maybe you should have a little bit of that. And I think it does affect the fight at times, but Dan is a likable guy. That's just him.
Yeah.
And people are going to like Dan. And at the end of the day, Dan is a great competitor. He wants to be in there and give the best that he can, but he's all about learning and growth. And I think it says a lot about who Dan Ige is, because there's not a lot of guys that will have the confidence or the ego to go and train with the guy that had beat him. And that's just Dan Ige, man. He's the guy that just says, look, if there's a way I can get better, and although it's somebody that has beat me and it's versus a camp that has beat me, myself included, I'm willing to go learn and come out better from that. A lot of people don't know this, but after the fight with Calvin and Dan, Tyson and I exchanged our notes. We exchanged our coaches' notes to one another. And the reason why is because, one, we do hold ourselves to a high standard of level of coaching, but we care so much about each other's fighters and our success later on down the line. If they do happen to have to fight each other again, we expect us to fix those damn holes or what we saw, so we come out better from it. So, he's one of my best friends. I talk to him weekly in Tyson. I have nothing but love for those guys, and it is what it is, man. It's the fight game, but we can show that there's a different side of it as well.
Yeah, 100%. Shout out to Tyson Charles here in the New England Cartel. But before we kind of turn the topic from Dan, I want to be careful about how I ask this question. As I mentioned, there's Dan's your guy, but he's in a bit of a difficult spot now with this 3-fight losing streak. I guess as his head coach, what do you do at this point to get him out of this poor run of form and get him back onto a win streak?
Yeah, man, it is. It's a tough situation to be in because, we lost to Korean Zombie. We lost to Josh Emmett, who's arguably the next in line for a title fight. And then we lost to Movsar, who's arguably the next up-and-coming phenom in the featherweight division. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, man. Those were losses. And those losses fall on me as his coach. It's up to me to find the ways to get him back on track. I think just finding the right matchup that fits us stylistically, that can help us go out and maximize our potential and do what we can do. There's a reason why there's a number next to Dan's name, is because he's willing to fight anybody at any time, and he's willing to go out and put on a show. But at this point during our career, you're absolutely right. I think it is important for us to try to find not necessarily a matchup that's like a winnable fight, but a matchup that I feel like will accentify his game and show who Dan is and what he's capable of doing. So, and we need to get that groove back, man. That's what it is. So yeah, being cautious, yes, but at the same time, it is Dan Ige, and that dude does not know caution at all. He'll fight anybody at the drop of a hat. But yeah, I think it's important for us to go out and get a win.
Is that almost maybe plagued this little run of form that Dan's almost too game? He's almost too happy to not to take on the hardest challenge, but to maybe sign on the dotted line against anybody, anytime, any place, anywhere.
No, I don't think so. I think it just makes him who he is. And he's got the respect of the fans and the media and his colleagues and everybody because of that. But it is a business, and you go out and lose 5 in a row. It's tough to keep a guy on your roster that does that. So we do have to be smart and calculated. Remember when we were fighting Korean Zombie, we were coming off the win of Gavin Tucker, and it was a rightful fight. We came into that fight as the favorite. Yeah. We go in and fought Josh Emmett. Josh Emmett's coming off a great win himself. And again, it was a super close fight. It was a competitive fight. We hung in there with Josh. We didn't get the victory, but again, it doesn't matter those close losses. They're still losses, right? So, and then I think Movsar really outclassed us, and I think it for us, it really made us go back to the drawing board and get back to work. So, Dan is a game guy, man. He's ready to fight anybody at any time. But again, for me as his coach now, I think I have to be better at saying, well, hold on, because I'm always the guy going, hell yeah, let's go fight that guy too, or let's do that too. So for me, it's a little bit being a little bit smarter on my end as well.
100%. Shout out Danny again. Shout out Baby Bam as well. Before we finish, Eric, I've got one final topic, because we've had a couple of conversations, and when I was preparing my notes for this conversation, I couldn't believe myself that I hadn't asked you this question. Who's your GOAT?
Fight or coach?
Who's your GOAT for the fighter, and who's your GOAT for a coach?
Randy Couture.
For a fighter?
Yeah, Randy Couture, man. It's tough to.
Why?
Well, I mean, obviously it's my lineage. It's my mentor. But I think for me, being able to see him compete firsthand and being in the room with him during fight camps, I don't think I've ever met somebody maybe next to Francis, Dan. There's a couple guys that come to mind, but when I think of a Randy Couture mentality of this ironclad, like there's nothing to get through this guy's mind, it's Randy, and he works on those things, and all the little intangibles I remember him working on before I really understood the fight game. He was well ahead of what I remember having a conversation with Randy, I don't know, 10 years ago about cage cutoffs, cage control, understanding octagon angles and the geometry of the cage. No one was really doing that shit back then. Dudes were in there fighting, right? And then it was just felt like he always was ahead of the game with whether it was his health, whether it was his rehab, whether it was the fight IQ and the games. It was Randy for me, man, for real. Like, and I know that's easy to say because it's in my house, but being able to see what he did, against Tim Sylvia firsthand, fighting Gabe Gonzaga, that, man, let me tell you about that camp. Like, I remember us just freaking out because here's Gabe Gonzaga coming off this massive knockout of Crow Cop. And our guy's going to fight this freaking gorilla. And, he had a lot of personal things going on in his life at the time. He goes out and blocks that head kick, I think, in the first round and breaks his arm, high crotches this dude and, proceeds to beat him up and TKO him and get a win. It wasn't until after the fight, Gabe Gonzaga came and trained with us. And, man, we all had to go with Gabe. And I'm like, I remember looking at somebody going like, holy shit, the old man beat this dude's ass. Like, this guy's a fucking machine. Like, how in the hell? And I think that's when the epiphany hit, like, on how badass Randy actually was when we had to train with Gabe Gonzaga, after Randy already beat him. So, man, he's a legend in my eyes. I know for a fact I'm not where I'm at today without him and his teachings, and not only just in the MMA game, but just in the personal space. He's always been a guy that I can lean on. So he's definitely my GOAT.
100%. And since you brought it up, I'd like to ask you, who's your GOAT in terms of coaching? Who's your GOAT in terms of head coach?
Man, it's tough to say. I think you can look at many different coaches and give a reason why. Robert Follis is always going to have a special place in my heart, of course, because of him being a mentor of mine. That Team Quest lineage, of course. Henry Hooft is always going to come to mind as far as a guy who's been another mentor to me and a big brother. Trevor Whitman, I think, is up there for me. There's a lot, man. Faraz Zahabi, man. I think Faraz has done a freaking marvelous job with what he's done it with GSP's career. Greg Jackson as well. You got to put his name in the hat. So I think that's just such a subjective. Javier Mendez, right? Javier Mendez has got his arsenal of guys. The guys over at ATT, Mike Brown, he's got his crew of guys. So it's very tough to say who the GOAT is when it comes to coaching. But I think for me, when you look at guys who can build fighters from the ground up and get them to a successful level, guys who can take fighters who maybe have the athleticism but haven't had the success and get them to the championship level, and guys that can maintain that and keep that where it's just this revolving door of success. And right now, I think Henry's doing that, man. I think he's showing all facets of the coaching game. So, I think you can point at quite a few guys, but I'm always just trying to catch them.
Well, with respect, Eric, I think you're very much in that list as well. Even though I'm sure you'll be humble and say you don't deserve it. I would like to reiterate that I think you are very much on that list with all the great work you guys are doing.
I appreciate that, man. And, I'm always trying to chase those guys too, because I just hold them to such a high standard. So, and man, I'll tell you what, Randy, he was a damn good coach too. I've had Randy in the corner many a times with Ryan, and Forrest Griffin actually said that to me last week. I was talking to Forrest and he goes, who was a freaking great guy to have in the corner? And that was Randy. He said, Randy, you look over and when Randy Couture is telling you to do something, you better well fucking do it. And that was what Forrest was telling me. So, Randy was a great corner in his own right.
I can well imagine. Eric, it's always a pleasure to get your time. It really, really is. And I'm truly honored that I can get a little bit of your knowledge and I can understand the game even more greatly as a result of your time. So thank you so much for your time as always. And I look forward to seeing Aljo back in action this month and hopefully catching up with you in the not too distant future.
My pleasure, Mike. It's always good to talk to you, my man.
Before we finish, Eric, how can people find you on social media and anything you would like to plug with regards to the gym or sponsorships? The floor is yours. for the last word.
Yeah, Eric_XCMMA. That's pretty much where I'm most active, is on my Instagram. I'm on Twitter here and there. That's usually putting out Casey O'Neill fires or somebody's talking shit or something. So I'll jump on my Twitter. But usually on Instagram is where you can find me the best.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKick MMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.